All right, welcome. I'm Amanda Ryland. I am the 21st Century State Coordinator for Alabama, and this is the eGAP application training, where I'm going to walk you guys through how to put your application for the 21st Century Cohort 27 application into our eGAP, our eGrants management system called eGAP. I don't really have slides or anything to share with you today. I'm going to actually just walk you through where to go and how to get into eGAP. I want to start by talking to those of you who may be a new organization that might need an account in eGAP. There is information in the RFA starting on page 35 and on 36 that talks about how to determine whether your organization is already in eGAP. If they've ever applied for a federal grant before, they may already be in the system. Sometimes we go to put a new organization, CBO or FBO, faith-based organization into eGAP, and they're already in there. It's just the account was created several years ago. So there is a way for you to go into eGAP to see if your organization is already listed in the system. And then there's also a way to determine who has user access to that account, because it could be that your organization applied for a grant many years ago, and the people who actually applied for the grant, who have access to the account, no longer have that access. I'm going to put a link in the chat. Hopefully it works. Okay, I just put a link in the chat for those of you who, when you go into eGAP, who do not have access. Your organization is not in eGAP already, and if you need an account to be created, then this link is to a Google form where you can go in and fill out the information that we need in order to create an account for you in eGAP. All right. Another thing I could go ahead and probably be helpful would be for me to share with you the eGAP website address. So give me just 1 second. I'll put that in the chat as well. All right, and then I am going to share my screen with you guys, and we will get started. Give me just 1 second. All right. So I'm sharing my screen. Get that out, sorry. Let me get it where I can see the chat. Give me just 1 second. This is always fun to try to figure out how to do this, but I can answer your questions as needed. Sorry, give me just 1 second. All right, now I can see the chat. Okay. All right, so if you notice, when you go to the actual eGAP website, it does not have this red writing across the top. I'm going to be working today out of what we call our test site. It allows us to test applications and make example applications and things like that. It allows us to allow like school systems to practice doing an eGAP application. It's very similar to the original site. It's almost exactly the same. There's a couple of things that are slightly different, which I'll talk to you guys about, but I'm going to be working today in the eGAP test site. But before I sign in, let me go ahead and show you what I was just talking about a moment ago. If you go to eGAP and you want to know if your organization already has an account, you can go to the website, go to search, and click on organizations. Okay, hold on. Yes, I know. All right. Let me refresh this. Sorry. Okay, let me try that again. All right, so now I'm at the original page. I apologize. So now I'm going to go to organizations. Anybody in the public can do this. You don't have to have an account to search if an organization exists. So let's say that I'm a Boys and Girls Club. I'm just going to type in under organization's name, I'm going to type in boys and hit enter. And it shows me here, sorry, I'm it's not going away. It shows me here all the different boys and girls clubs that have an account in eGAP. Okay. So let's say I'm from Boys and Girls Club of the River Region. I can, as a member of the public, I can go in and click on that organization. And then I can go back over here to the left where it says address book. And I can click there. And it will show me all of the people who have access to the Boys and Girls Club of the River Region's account. Okay. So I can see that the 21st Century Director at the time that this account was created, it might have been Nicole Evans or Luella Giles or Richard Jackson. There's a lot of different positions that are listed here that may not apply to you. But one thing, when you do, if you do need an account, you can ask for a LEA user access administrator account to be created. And that means this person that is labeled or has this title is able to give anyone access to, or give anyone assign anyone to a different role, any of these roles that are listed here, so that they can work in the account. So Nicole Evans and Richard Jackson can give permissions to anyone in their organization to, for example, be the fiscal representative. So if you go in and click on that forms, if you go in and click that, and there's the last column, I believe it asks you what positions you need assigned to the person who's asking for the account to be created. You can choose for them to be the user access administrator, and then they can go in and assign the other roles to other people within their organization. Okay. So I just wanted to show that to everyone before we move to the next step in 21st Century. So again, in the application. So again, anybody can see this information. You don't have to be signed in. You don't have to have an account to search for an organization and to see who in that organization has access to that account. Okay. All right. So I'm going to now sign in. So to sign in, you click on eGAP sign in. And so this is my typical email, but I'm going to put in the email address of one of her organizations. I looked up a couple earlier today just so I could use their account. Again, it's a test account. It doesn't do anything to their actual account. But I'm going to sign in as an LEA. And when I say LEA, please understand that that encompasses all organizations who can apply for 21st Century. When these roles are assigned, they're assigned across multiple different federal programs. And so they call it, like, for example, an LEA authorized user, but really that should say LEA/CBO/FBO. Like, there's so many different things that it could mean. So if I refer to LEAs when I'm talking about the eGAP application, I apologize. I am including community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, all of those in with that when I say LEA. Okay, so I'm going to sign in as an LEA or an organization from their level. So give me a second. All right, I tested this earlier to make sure it will work. So today I'm going to pretend to be Alabama Aerospace, which is a charter school, but the application works the same way either way. So now I've signed in, and I can see I've got my organization name, my organization number, and I want to begin the 21st Century grant application. So the first thing I'm going to do is go over to funding on the far left side, and I'm going to click on funding applications. This will give me access to the different types of funding applications I can apply for. Now, keep in mind that this grant, Cohort 27, it will actually begin in the fiscal year of 2027. So the first thing I have to do is, well, it's not the first thing, I've had to do other things, but the next thing I have to do is change my year to 2027 in order to see the 21st Century Cohort 27 application. Okay, you'll notice that it opened today. Didn't quite make our deadline of 8 a.m., but we were very, very soon after we had it open. And so to start that application, and you don't have to finish it all in one setting, you can start on it and work on it as you go. But to start that application, I'm going to click that application. All right. Now I'm in the application, and in order for me to do anything, in order for me to make any changes or to add any information, I have to first change my status to draft started. If you don't do that, it won't let you do anything. So 90% of the calls that we get from people who are new to eGAP saying that I can't get it to work is because they never hit the draft started button. So I'm going to hit draft started. It gives me kind of a warning. You're about to change the status to draft started. Click confirm, and I'm going to click confirm. Okay. So now I'm able to actually put things in the application. So let me walk you through these different sections, okay? First, you have your history log. Right now, if I click on history log, it's not going to show me much. It's going to show, this is my username, NT004. I don't know why, but that's what it is. It's going to show that I clicked on the application, which put my status into not started. And then it shows that shortly after, I changed my status to draft started. So that's all it's going to show right now, but it'll show the history of who's gone into the application and who's made changes to it. All right. To go back to the main menu, the way I like to do it is I go back to save and go to, and I go back to sections, and that'll take me back to that original screen that I was on. If you want to add a comment to your history log, then you can click on create comment, and it'll pop up a comment box where you can put some information in there. Probably will not have any reason to create a comment in working on your application, but if you do get the grant in the future, then sometimes we ask you to put comments in about certain things that you want to purchase. We sometimes put comments in if there's a change that needs to be made, but it's not a significant enough change where we're going to reject your application, and we'll put a comment in that says, upon your next revision, please fix this, and we'll put a comment in there. So that's what that's for. So you really should not need this box in working on your application. Then you have the allocations. Right now, if you click on allocations, it's not going to show anything. Once you get your applications entered and submitted, then it may, I believe it does at that point, show the different amounts for each of the grants that you plan to submit. But right now, you don't need to click on allocations. There's nothing here that you need. So these first two sections, in preparing for your application, you really don't need to do anything with them. When you get to supplemental information, this is where things start getting important. So the first thing that you'll find are assurances. And if you click on assurances, it lists all of the federal and state program requirements and assurances that by submitting this application, you as an organization are agreeing to. So it is very important for you to read these and make sure that you can, in good conscience, agree to all of the things that are listed here, because these are the laws and program requirements for getting a 21st Century grant. You'll notice that there are a lot of them. It does reference the actual federal law that each of these items comes from, so you will understand that we didn't just make things up. But some of these at the bottom are more of state level requirements that we ask for. So for example, let's see, one that's more of a state requirement. Let's see. Well, a lot of these are all also federal requirements. First one I wanted to focus on was like field trips. Field trips should be connected to the academic or enrichment program and provide an educational experience for students to grow academically or culturally. So that is a state rule, but it's also encouraged by the feds. So it would also fall into their rules as well. But some of these may be like, for example, here's one, 16. In Alabama, we require that you do a fingerprinted criminal background check on anyone, any staff members or volunteers or vendors who are going to work directly with students. Other states may not require the fingerprinted criminal background check. They may accept one with a little bit less involvement than having to be fingerprinted. But here in Alabama, it is a requirement that you go through the fingerprinted criminal background check for all of your staff, vendors, and volunteers. So these are our Alabama rules and regulations. Now, is this all of them? No. There's more that are in the RFA, but this is a good summary of them. But when your final person approves your application, a box is going to pop up that says, by submitting this application, you are agreeing to the assurances that come with this grant. And these are the assurances that box, that statement is referring to. So you're agreeing to do all of these things when you submit your application. All right, I'm going to go back to sections. Now you can, if you know where you want to go, you can click on any of these boxes and it'll take you where you want to go. But for now, I'm just going to keep going back to that main page, that sections page, just so that I make sure I cover everything. All right, so you don't have to do anything in the assurance page except for read the assurances and make sure that you can do the things that it says that you have to do. But now we're going to get into the first part of the application where you actually have to input information, and that's going to be the subgrantee contact information. All right, so as you see, there's places that you have to enter. Anything with a star is a requirement. So this is Alabama Aerospace, so I'm going to put Alabama Aerospace. I'm not going to fill all these things in. The UEI number, that's the unique entity identification number that is given to you by, I think the feds provide that. You need to have one of those. It's usually like U6354 or whatever. I'm just making things up, okay? You're going to put your street address, XYZ, whatever. I'm just filling in fields. Montgomery, put in phone numbers. If you have a website, it asks you to put the website. Now this is a required field, so hopefully you have a website to enter. But you could put, ALSDE.edu, whatever your website is, whoever your primary contact is for the grant. I'm just putting any random information in. Primary contact title. I'm gonna put director. Phone number. Just picking a random phone number. Let's see, 349. Now it auto-filled my email address, but of course that wouldn't be right. It would be whoever the person is, but I'm just gonna leave that there for now. And then it asks you, does the applicant currently have a funded 21st century program? If you are currently in FY26, which is what we're in right now, fiscal year 26, which means it's the 25-26 school year, If you currently have a 21st century grant, then you would need to pick one of these boxes. So you may have a cohort 17 grant. You might have gotten the grant for cohort 25 or 26, which ran together. That's a long story. I'm not going to go into that today, but that was our last grant competition. Or you may have a grant under both, cohort 17 and 25. Those are the only two cohorts we currently have, or actually three, if you include 25 summer. Those are the only three cohorts we currently have going right now. So if you had the grant as part of cohort 16, you would select no, because if you had 16, you don't currently have a grant. Okay, so I'm just going to pick no, but I could have picked any of these others. And so that's my information. That needs to be the primary, the information of the primary organization on the grant. Now, if you are applying for this grant with a co-applicant, then you would need to click on this next box. This says organization has a joint or co-applicant. If you click on that, then it basically pulls up the same information for you to add the co-applicant's information. Please keep in mind that a co-applicant is another organization. One of the organizations has to be an LEA, or this is if you're wanting to get priority points for applying with a like as a joint applicants. One of them has to be an LEA that is that qualifies for Title I school-wide funding. Okay, they don't necessarily have to get Title I funds, but they have to at least be eligible for those Title I funds. And a co-applicant literally needs to be an organization or a partner that is just as involved in creating the application, and then if you get the grant, implementing the grant, managing the funds, managing the staff, determining the curriculum, helping to teach, helping to plan field trips. They need to be as actively involved in the implementation of the grant as the primary applicant, or very close to it. I think in past grants, just because we didn't really know any better to look for this, we've had situations where people applied as co-applicants, but they were really more, the co-applicant was really more of a community partner. In other words, they're in the community, they want to help with the grant. Maybe they're going to have someone that's going to come in and mentor the kids once a week or every other week, or they're going to provide snacks, or they're going to fund field trips, something of that nature, but they're not actively involved in the day-to-day running of the program, then that is a community partner, not a co-applicant. So we're going to be much more careful this year in looking at who your co-applicants are to make sure that they really are a true co-applicant. Okay, so just keep that in mind. But if you are having a co-applicant, you will need to fill in their information in this box. I don't want to take the time to fill these in right now, so I'm going to uncheck this, and I'm going to go to my next thing. So to get these items to save, even though a lot of them don't make any sense right now, I'm going to hit the save and go to. Now, I don't think you have to do this. Always hit the save and go to button first, just to make sure it saves. And then I go to the drop down and go back to my original page, to sections. I think it's supposed to, if you go to save and go to, and then click on one of the drop downs, I think it's supposed to actually save what you just did. But I've seen it glitch in the past where it didn't save. So I always just do it twice just to be safe. You can decide how you want to do that at your own discretion. Okay. So we've now filled in our subgrantee contact information. Now remember, another thing I want to make sure I clarify is the subgrantee is the overarching organization that's applying for 21st century funds, they can have one site or they can have multiple sites. Okay. So the subgrantee is typically going to be an LEA or an organization like Boys and Girls Club or the YMCA or whoever, whatever community organization, that is the subgrantee, and it's their contact information that goes under subgrantee contact information. All right, new applicant summary. Right now, if you click on that, it's not going to show anything because you haven't put any applications in yet. So that doesn't do you any good yet. So you can skip that. And then this cohort 27 checklist is also doesn't show you anything either. If this is something that we would use at the state level sometimes to check to make sure you had everything in your application, but right now we don't really take advantage of this part of the application. So you can ignore the checklist. Here's where you're going to do most of your work, and it's going to be in this bottom section that's labeled 21st Century Cohort 27. So when you click on this drop-down box, you're going to, the first thing you want to do is you want to add a grant application, okay? So I hit add grant application, and this is where I'm going to put the name of my 21st Century Center, okay? We really prefer it if you can incorporate the name of the school that you're going to be serving into the name of your 21st century site, because it can get really, really confusing when someone reaches out to us and says, what can you tell us about the Stars Abound 21st Century Center? And we're like, you know, there's hundreds of, we have 150 or something of these. We don't know where Stars Abound. We don't know who the subgrantee is. We don't know what schools they serve. We don't know what LEA they are in. We have to spend 20 minutes sometimes searching to try to find the Stars Abound 21st Century Center. So sometimes that's not possible. Like sometimes a subgrantee may plan to serve multiple schools. For example, there's Girls Inc., who basically serves populations of girls from multiple schools. It wouldn't be feasible to put all those schools' names in the name of their grant. But if you're just serving one or two elementary schools, we would love it. It would be extremely helpful. It asks you to do in the RFA to put the name of that school into your name. It also says that you have to have either 21st Century Community Learning Centers spelled out or just the abbreviation somewhere in the name as well. So since this is Alabama Aerospace and Aviation, and that's just a charter school, it's just the one school, but I'm gonna pretend like it's an LEA. So let's say I'm just gonna make something up. I'm going to put I don't know. I'm gonna put Amanda Rylant Elementary 21st CCLC. Okay, just make up a name. Notice I've got hopefully the name of my elementary school that I mostly serve. I've got 21st CCLC in there. If it's two schools combined into one grant, I might have Amanda Rylant and Bob Jones Elementary Schools or whatever, / between the two. But that really does help us if you put the name of the school in the name of your 21st century site, if at all possible. Like having cool names are awesome, but it really causes a huge amount of conflict for us when we can't figure out where your 21st century site is at. All right, so I'm going to hit add application. And now you'll notice that when I click on this drop-down box, Amanda Rylant Elementary 21st Century Program is listed as one of my options. Let's say I'm going to apply for 2 sites. If that's the case, I'm going to hit add grant application again, And I'm going to put the name of my second site. Carla White High School. 21st CCLC. And I'm going to hit add application. And now when I click on my drop-down box, I've got Amanda Rollin Elementary and Carla White High School. And I'm going to do this for as many different sites as I plan to have under my grant. Okay, under my overarching subgrantee organization. Okay. Now, keep in mind that for every site, you basically have to mostly create a whole new application. All of the questions have to be answered for each site. So the more sites you create, the more work that you have to do. But each of these sites is granted, if they score high enough, then each site will be granted money on its own. Okay. There's oftentimes when a subgrantee will, or an applicant will submit like for 5 sites and only 2 of them score high enough to actually get the grant. It could be that all 5 get the grant. It could be that only 1 gets the grant. So it really just, they're each scored separately. So just keep that in mind, that don't assume that because you put information under one applicant or one site that that information is going to carry over to your other sites. It doesn't. Each site is scored separately by different peer reviewers. And so you need to make sure that all of the information for that site is included in that site's application. Okay, if you decide that you no longer want to do Amanda Rollin Elementary, you can hit delete grant application and take it out, or you can rename. So if I hit delete grant application, it gives me a drop down box. I can figure out which one I want to delete, and then I can hit the delete button. Now I'm just going to cancel it. If I want to change the name, same thing, application to rename. I pick which one I want to rename, and then I put in whatever the new name is, and then hit update. Okay. For now, I'm just going to cancel, but those are options that are available to you as well. All right. Our next step is going to be to click on the first site we want to work on. I'm going to click on Amanda Rollin Elementary, and this brings up the budget overview, application details, and related documents, and then 21st century allocations. The 3 main parts of this that you really need to, that you will be actually working in, are going to be your budget, your application details, and your related documents. The overview and the 21st century allocation portion are kind of automatically filled in for you once you have submitted your application. So in my opinion, I would think that you would actually start with your application details. This is where you're going to answer all of those questions that are in the RFA. Okay. So I would not necessarily start with the budget, but you can if you want to. But typically you would start with the application details. So I'm going to click on that. And it's going to take me to a majority of the application that's going to be scored. All right. So most of this I'm just going to put random information into, just to kind of make it where this doesn't take forever. But you have to be sure that you answer each question. So again, it asks you, what is the proposed name of this 21st century center? Hopefully you've already come up with it because you had to create it to create your, you had to create it in the drop-down box just to even put the application in. But, and it says here, it must include the 21st century spelled out or abbreviated in the name. And again, we would love it if you would include the school name as well, but I'm just going to put in my Amanda Rollin Elementary. I don't know why this is popping up. Sorry. Elementary 21st CCLC. Okay. Identify the schools and LEA school district to be served by this center. So you can be brief here, you can go into details here, but this is where you're going to list any schools that you plan to serve with this site. We've said this before, we feel like it works better if you just have one site per school, but there are situations, especially in like very small towns, very small LEAs, where in order to qualify for the grant, you need to combine two schools together because they're so small that there's not enough students to serve, to get $50,000 worth of grant money to serve. So and then sometimes it just works out better that way. Sometimes there's issues with staffing where, it is too difficult to find staff to man two different sites. The sites are right next to each other. It's easy to combine them together. And so some school systems or some applicants choose to do that, and you're allowed to do that. But if that's the case, then you need to make sure you list those schools here. So let's say that Amanda Ryland Elementary 21st Century program is actually going to serve Amanda Ryland Elementary and Amanda Ryland Middle School. And, I would highly suggest that you put this in a complete sentence. So you might put something like, this site will serve Amanda Ryland Elementary and Amanda Ryland Middle School, which are located in Geneva City, or Geneva in the Geneva City School District, or whatever. I'm making all of this up, okay? So please understand this is totally all made up. I will say that in looking at the way that reviewers score things, they do appreciate when things are done correctly. So they do appreciate when you use a complete sentence, when you use appropriate punctuation, when you capitalize things the way you're supposed to. First impressions are always important. And so you don't want to be judged by just putting in the bare minimum and not, correcting your spelling errors like I have here, or your grammatical errors. I think this is more of a punctuation errors. But the nice thing about eGAP is it does flag you if you have something spelled wrong, or if you have a punctuation error, or a capitalization error. So that is nice. And you can fix those things and make sure it looks nice and professional. All right. Then it says the proposed program center is or will be located in is it in a public school building, a private school building, or other? If you choose other, then it pops up another box, and you're supposed to describe what kind of building the center will be located in, and if the center will be housed in more than one building or location. So this is where you're going to describe where your center is going to be located. In most cases, I would say 95% of the time, 21st century centers are located in a public school building, but there are situations where sometimes they're housed at a YMCA or at a local church or something like that. So this is where you need to tell us where your 21st century site is going to be housed. Where are the kids going to go when school gets out at the end of the day? And where are the activities going to take place that you're going to provide for these students? So I'm just going to put something random here, just to have something there. Center addresses, including including city and zip code. So we want to know the address of where your 21st century center is going to be housed. So of course, that's going to be your physical address. So again, you would put something like, this 21st Century Center will be located at 1234 Brook Street, Geneva City, whatever, Alabama. Okay. What grade levels will the center serve? So here you could say our center will serve grades 1 through 4 from the elementary school, and grades 6 through 8 from the middle school. Okay, I'm not going to type all this out because you all have better things to do than watch me make things up. All right. Okay. What is the total student enrollment count for the proposed schools being served by this center? So if you're serving one school, then you would put the total enrollment of that school. So let's say it's an elementary school and it has typically 600 students. You would put in 600. If you're going to serve 2 schools, each of them having 600 students, you would put 1,200 here. Okay. What we want to get a general idea of is how big of a population will you have to pull kids from for your 21st century program. Because if you're serving, let's just say you're serving an elementary school that has 230 students, and you say that your 21st century program is going to serve 200 students a day, that's not going to happen. That would be a miracle if you got all but 30 kids to stay after school every day. So that's the reasoning for this question. We also ask, what is the poverty percentage rate for the proposed school being served by this center? Hopefully you have access to PowerSchool and can pull this up, but if you don't, you can also access this information in eGAP. I don't want to show you how to do that right this second because I don't want to get out of this application, but you can look up the school and determine what the poverty rate of the school is, and you would put that information in here. If you need help with that, just let us know. If I remember, I'll go back and show you at the end of the presentation how to find that information. The next question is, what is the proposed total number of students and families to be served annually, academic year and summer by the program? So I said that I have 600 students at my school, and I really feel like I can adequately serve 100 students and maybe 10 of their family members. So I'm going to put 110. Keep in mind that you are allowed to also serve the family members of the students of the students who attend your 21st century program. Jason, I'm going to get to that in just one second. You are allowed to also serve family members. And if you do that, you're allowed to provide activities for family members either after school or during the school day. So you can use 21st century funds to do things like have a parenting class for family members of your 21st century students, or maybe something like not a job fair, but job skills, teaching adults, or maybe you could focus on your ELA, your English language learning parents, on teach them methods for reading with their students and things like that. So you can do that, but it does have to be, you can serve those adults, but it does have to be family members of your 21st century students. It can't be just any random person from the community. It does have to be a family member of the 21st century students. So anyway, if you're going to do something like that, you would include those family members in your count, okay? And then we ask you to provide the days of the week and times the program will operate each day for the academic year and the summer if applicable. So if you plan to run during the academic year, of course, you want to put this in a complete sentence. Sorry, I suddenly forgot how to spell academic year. We will run our program from 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock p.m. Monday through Friday for 36 weeks, which is basically the entire school year. Another thing to keep in mind is that you are expected to run your program for the entire school year, which is typically 36 weeks. doesn't necessarily count like that first week of school that sometimes schools start like on a Wednesday or a Thursday. You don't necessarily have to start your program on that first day, but you're supposed to start your program on the first full week of school. So do keep that in mind. Also, you might want to keep in mind when you're doing your budget that that for your first year of your grant, if you're starting a new program and it's the first year of the grant, your funds are going to have to carry you for from the first day of school and really anything you do prior to that, like trainings and things like that, all the way to September 30th of the next year. So, so you're going to have to budget not in your first year only. You may have to budget more than 36 weeks because you have to also account for the first 8 weeks of the second year of your program, okay, in your budget. So keep that in mind. Okay, and then so I put my hours for my academic year, and then I may put something like summer. We will run from 8 o'clock a.m. to 5 o'clock p.m. for 5 weeks. Okay, I've seen some things pop up. Can I go back over the estimated student count? Do you add school year and summer together, even if it's the same students? For this one, yes, you can add them together. This is just like a general, we don't hold you to this number. The number we're going to hold you to is the number that you're going to put when you do your funding calculation, and you would count those separately. So this is just kind of to give us a general idea. I'm just being boldly honest with you right now that when I go in and look at this, I'm really looking to say, okay, this seems feasible. They've got 600 kids at the school. They say they're going to serve around 110. That seems doable. I'm looking for sites that say they're going to serve 90% of the kids that they have in their school. That's not really feasible, not really doable. That's when I'm going to ask some questions, right? So that's kind of really what we're looking for with these two questions. Okay. Let me see if there's anything else. If we are only serving 2 grades out of our K-4 elementary school, would we only input the number of students in those 2 grades for total student enrollment? That is correct. You only, so that would account here because the question is, what is the proposed total? No, I'm sorry. Excuse me. I think you're actually referring to this part. What is the total student enrollment count for the proposed school being served? You can go ahead and put the entire amount for the whole school because that's what the question is asking for. But here you would only put the amount of students you plan to serve, which would be the ones in those 2 grades. Okay. So again, these 2 questions are really just kind of give us a quick glance at what your plans are. When we ask for those numbers again in a few minutes that are way more important. Those are the numbers we expect you to stick to. Okay. All right. I want to make sure that I've answered everybody's questions up to this point. All right. Now we're going to get to the part about the 1.6. Oh, wait. I'm so sorry, Jason. I've read that wrong. Okay. So the question is, do you use the 1.6 multiplier rate or the actual rate from the building eligibility page? I'm assuming you're talking about the poverty rate. We are asking, I would probably say you need to use the actual rate from the building eligibility page. Again, this kind of just gives us an indication as to whether the school you're serving is eligible for Title I services. So that's what we're looking for. If you want to put the 1.6 multiplier, you technically could, if that's what you use in the system to determine whether they're Title I eligible or not. But it's really kind of one of those things that we glance at because the feds do ask for us. They say that that priority should be given to those who plan to serve students who are in schools that are eligible for Title I funding. It's basically what that comes down to. So if we glance at it and the poverty rate is only 20%, that's a red flag that, oh, I need to go look and see. And we're not just going to take your word for it, what you put here. We're going to actually go look and see what the numbers are and say, okay, this site is planning on serving a school that's not Title I eligible. They probably, they do not, that, I'm not going to say it would disqualify them from the grant, but it would definitely drop that eligibility down, because the feds have really changed the wording and the guidance to really specify that 21st century funds should be spent on students who go to Title I eligible schools. So, so anyway, that's the point of that question. Okay, let me get back to where I was. Okay. The next question, and this is, I don't know why this is here and not in other places. Sometimes it asks you about checking the spelling or gives you the number of characters. I don't know why that's there in some places and not in others. It's the way they set it up when they created the application. Sorry about that. Okay, next question is, will transportation to and from the center be provided for students? If you plan to provide this at any point, either during the summer or during the school year, you can pick yes for this. And what we mean by this is that you are going to pay for buses to either take the kids home during the school year after the 21st century program is over, or if you're having a summer program, you plan to transport students to that summer program and then home from the summer program. If either one of those apply, then you can pick yes here. Okay. Then it asks you to indicate if the schools that you're serving are rural or urban. Okay. Rural means that they are qualified for Title V funding. The LEA should know whether the school is considered rural or not. If you are unsure, then you can contact us and we can help you locate this information. Off the top of my head right now, I can't think of exactly where to tell you to go to find that information. But usually an LEA would know whether you're considered rural or not. There's a website you can go to also search this information. The reason why we need to know this is because we do have a transportation supplement that we give. And if you are in a rural area, the supplement is higher than if you're in an urban area, because those rural schools tend to spend a lot more money on gas and mileage and things like that, because they're having to take their students really far distances away from the school in some cases. And so we provide more money for those schools that are providing transportation in those rural areas. So I'm going to go ahead and click rural just because I feel like it. Let me see what other questions popped up really quick. Okay, field trips do not count for this. Okay, field trips are additional. So field trips are extra, so that when we ask you about transportation, we're not talking about field trips. It's assumed that you're going to have to pay for transportation for field trips at some point or another, but that is not what the transportation supplement is for. Okay. Okay. All right, the question is, our district does not qualify for Title V since we have at least one school that's not rural. However, we do have schools that are rural. How would we answer this question? Okay, so I would assume that if you're planning to serve a rural site, then you're not necessarily going to combine that school with another site because of the fact that it's rural. If it is out in the country, away from other schools and away from other buildings, then that site is probably going to be housed at that school. Remember, you're answering this question for that particular site. So I haven't encountered a situation where a site is serving two schools, one of them in a rural area and one of them in an urban area, on the same, and considering them the same site. So yes, you do it by school and not district. That's correct. You look at if the school is considered rural, that the site is going to be at, that's what you look at when you're answering this question, not necessarily whether the district itself is considered rural. That's a great question. Okay. And it does ask, it says indicate if the schools served are rural or urban. So you're looking at the individual schools that you plan to serve as part of this particular site. Okay. Has the center or the schools attended by students served by the center received a 21st century grant before? If you click yes, a drop-down box pops up and we just ask you to tell us when you've had the 21st century grant before. If you don't know, if it's been many, many years, just say that. Just say, I know we had the grant, 8 to 10 years ago. You don't have to give great details. We just kind of want to get a general idea of whether you've ever had a 21st century program in your area before, and kind of if you know what you're getting into, I guess is kind of a funny way to look at it. But we don't necessarily expect you to say we had cohort 3, 7, 20, whatever. We don't expect you to have to put the exact years and all that kind of stuff. Just provide us with as much information as you are able to provide. Because, I'm the state coordinator and I couldn't tell you who got the grant 6 years ago. I may be able to find it in a file here somewhere, but it would be very difficult for me to find. So, and that's just me being honest. So we would like for you to provide us with that information if possible. But if you can only just say, yes, I know we've had the grant before, but I'm not exactly sure when, that's perfectly fine to say. All right. But for now, I'm going to click no, just so I don't fill in that box. Okay. And so next, program will occur year-long. That means you're going to have a program both during the academic year and the school year, or you could have a program during the academic year only, or you can actually apply for a summer-only program, okay? So just tell us which one you plan to do. I'm going to say year-long, which means academic and school year. And then program activities will be held, I'm going to pick after school, but you can choose any of these. Before school, summer break, weekends, holidays, school breaks. You can actually have your program during any of these times. Just note that your program hours, actually I'm gonna pick after school and summer break. Your program hours that you commit to in a few minutes when you're calculating your funding, that is not necessarily referring to before school time or weekends or holidays. Okay, it doesn't necessarily count towards that. You're welcome to have a program during those times if you want to, but when we're looking at your funding and the number of program hours you plan to serve students, we're really having you focus on, well, let me rephrase that. Let me take that back. You can include those in the total number of hours you plan to serve the students, but there are minimums that you have to serve depending on what grade students you're serving. And so only the after school hours and summer break hours apply towards those minimums. So for example, if you're going to do a summer program, it has to at least run for 75 hours during the summer. So you couldn't just run it for like 2 weeks and then add weekends on to give you a little extra time. That wouldn't count. Okay. Probably a poor example, but hopefully you get my drift. So you can include it in your program for your funding hours, but please note that we're going to look for that you did those things, but it doesn't help you meet those minimum number of hours that you have to serve students. And again, that varies depending on the grade. So I think for elementary, I want to say it's like 360 hours. It's in here in the RFA. I'm sorry. It's different than last year. Last year we had just a 300-hour across the board minimum, but this year we kind of looked at what some other states were doing and determined that the number of hours needed to vary, especially for those high schools that sometimes have a hard time getting kids to come every day after school for their programs. And so the hours for them are actually reduced. And I don't want to spend all day sitting here trying to find it, but it is in the application. It is in the RFA somewhere towards the beginning. Okay. Okay. So I picked after school and summer. All right. I know this kind of asked the same question twice. I apologize. It's just the way the system is set up, but you'll see why in just a moment. So this next part, program center eligible funding, you're going to pick one or the other or both, and it will pull down. It's going to have a calculation, a place for you to put in a calculation to determine how much funding you're eligible for. This is where your numbers count. These are the numbers that we're going to hold you accountable for and expect you to try to meet. Okay. So proposed, and you have to do it separately for the academic year than the summer. And the reason why we did it that way is because the summer hours are often much longer, and it's often a different group of kids that go to summer programming versus who goes to after school programming. So to be fair, we decided to calculate these two separately, even though really in the grand scheme of things, the two amounts will be added together to give you your total funding. All right, so if you say you're going to run your program during the academic year, you click that button and it brings up these boxes. You're going to enter in your proposed total number of students that will be served each academic year. You don't know, all you can do is guess. If you currently run an after school program that's either funded through 21st Century or through another funding source, then you may have a really good idea of how many students will participate in your in your after school program. If you're starting from scratch and this is the first time that school has ever had an after school program, then oftentimes you're just kind of guessing at this number. Of course, it helps to put out surveys, try to, ask families and students who's interested in having an after school program. That's part of that needs assessment that you should be doing. So hopefully that will help you get a good idea. But a lot of times sites will just kind of choose a number that they feel is accurate. And that's what we ask you to do here. So I'm just going to put in 100 just to have a nice round number. I'm planning to serve 100 students. And then I have to put in my proposed total number of program hours for 21st century academic year activities only. When you're talking about your academic hours, you're only going to look for one academic year, so 36 weeks. So you need to take what you said your hours were going to be. I said my hours were going to be from 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock, Monday through Friday. So that's 2 hours a day for 5 days. That's 10 hours a week. 10 hours a week times 36 is 360 hours. Do not include in this those extra 8 weeks that you'll have in your second year of programming, because that only happens in your first year, and this is the amount you'll get each year of the grant. Okay. I know that may seem a little unfair, but it is a lot more money than what sites used to get with 21st Century. So hopefully you can make it stretch in that first year. Also, you're probably not actually going to meet your student number that you hope to meet in your first year, which is okay. We don't necessarily expect you to, because you're still building your program. We don't hold you accountable for this number until year 2. So now we don't want you to put some huge inflated number and then just be like, okay, well, if we can't meet our goal, then we'll just get cut later. We prefer for you not to do that, because that is literally you taking money from another site who could have gotten the grant. So if you inflate this and say, we're going to serve 250 kids, and I grant you enough money to serve 250 kids, and then by year 2, you're only able to serve 75, that's going to cut your funding in half, and that's a big pot of money that I could have given to another 21st century site who could be serving students in the state of Alabama. So we ask you to not, we ask you to think about what is actually feasible to really do some research into how many kids are actually going to participate, and also what you can handle. Like how many kids will the space that you're going to have your programming in handle? How many staff members can you really expect to be able to hire to work after school? So please take all those things into account before choosing this number, okay? Again, then I'm gonna put in my total number of program hours. So if I use my example, that would be 360 during the school year. So 2 hours a day, 5 days a week for 36 weeks, that's 360 hours. And when I put that in, it will calculate for me the eligible amount of funding that I qualify for the academic year, which is at this point $216,000. Okay. Now I'm going to put in for the summer. So I'm also doing a summer program. My program is going to occur each summer. And I think during the summer that I'm actually going to be able to serve 125 students, because we typically have more kids come during the summer than we do during the school year. I'm just putting a guess out there. And I'm going to, I'll just use my example that we had earlier. So my example that we had earlier was 8 to 5. I'm running my program from 8 to 5. So that's 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 9 hours a day. So 9 hours a day, 5 days a week, that's times 5, that's 45. And I said I was going to run it for 5 weeks. So that's times 5. So my summer program is going to run 225 hours. 225. And now when instead of hitting enter, I just have to click off of it. Now it calculates that for the summer, I'm going to get 168,750. Okay. Now, this next section is automated for me, but I do have to do one portion. Okay, so it's filled in the funding I qualify for the academic year. It's filled in the funding I qualify for the summer, and it's given me my total eligible funding amount at this point. But now I have to say whether I am providing transportation or not. If I do plan to provide transportation for my students, either during the academic year or during the summer program or both. And when I say that, I'm not talking about field trips. I'm talking about if it's during the school year, I'm taking kids home after the 21st century program is over every day. If it's during the summer program, then I'm either picking them up and then taking them home, or one or the other. I am actively providing daily transportation to these kids so that they can come to 21st century. Then I can get this transportation supplement. And since I said I was a rural school, I actually qualify for $20,000 extra dollars. So I'm going to put in my $20,000. I think that's right. I have the right number of zeros there. And now it's added that to my total amount. Now, in this year's grant, the maximum amount you can get is $350,000 plus your transportation supplement. Okay. Unfortunately, it would have been great if when this application was built, if we could have put in where it would automatically give you a warning if you went over that amount, or if it would automatically reduce it for you, but that would have taken more time. And I was afraid that if I asked them to do that, the application would not be ready in time. So here's where we're going to need you to do a little math yourself. But basically, it's not that hard. It says you qualify for $404,000, but our maximum amount is $350,000. Plus the transportation supplement. So the most you can get is $370,000. Okay. So this next question says, applicant requests the full amount the center is eligible to receive. If you pick that and it's for this amount of money, just understand that we're not giving you $404,750. the most that you're going to get is $370,000. But sometimes sites don't want the full amount that they can get. So this next one, if you choose the second one, we ask you to put the amount in that you are requesting. So it would be helpful if you would go ahead and put, if you qualify for less, if you would go ahead and put the $370,000 amount, if that's what you want. But we've had some sites that are like, hey, we've had 21st Century Grant before, and we had a difficult time spending $200,000. We don't want $370,000. What if we want less? Well, absolutely, you can request less if you qualify for more, but you want to request less, you're absolutely welcome to do that. Just understand that you can't come back later and say, hey, we changed our mind in year 2 or 3, we want our full amount now. Once the money has been allocated, it's allocated across the board. You can't get it back. Okay, so when you make that decision to take less money, then that's a permanent decision for all 4 years of this grant. Okay. All right. But again, if you don't listen to this presentation and just say, yes, we want the full amount, then the most that will allow you to get would be the $370,000, which would be, and that's only if you're getting the rural transportation supplement. If you're doing, if you're serving an urban school and you're doing transportation, the most you would be able to get would be $360,000. If you're not providing transportation, the most you can get is $350,000. Okay. I don't see any questions in the chat, so I'm just going to keep on trucking along. And next is where, this next section is where you're going to designate your cost center through which the funding will be allocated. The reason why this is asked is if you're applying as a joint applicant, that may be the case, or it could be that you're serving 2 different schools. You have to pick one of those as your cost center. So it's just something that's set up in eGAP. You have to choose like where the money is actually going to be sent to. And so that's why you would have to designate who your cost center is. Typically, hopefully, it's just going to be the one school that you serve, and that would be your cost center. But that's where you're going to put this information. All right, next question. I'm just going to put NA, even though it wouldn't be NA. Next question, specify how the program will recruit and retain students and staff. So this is how you would fill in this information. This is where you're getting into answering those narratives and putting in your answers. So you would put your answer there. And then this next section is your competitive priority points. So please understand that you have to choose which priority points that you feel you qualify for, okay? If you don't go in, notice that this is not, there's no star here, so this is not mandatory. If you accidentally skip this section or skip it for now and plan to go back later and forget, even if you very obviously qualify for one of the priorities, if you don't check these boxes, you will not get the priority points, okay? So make sure that you check the box for each priority point you feel like you qualify for. And I've said this at several of the other office hour meetings, but there's not really a place for you to explain, like a specific place for you to explain why you feel like you qualify for each priority point. You kind of have to do that within the body of the application somewhere in the other questions that you have to answer. So I would be very specific if I were you. If I feel like I qualify for priority 3, the center will enroll students who may be at risk for academic failure, dropping out of school, involvement in criminal or delinquent activities, this whole thing, I would be very specific. You would probably provide your evidence for this in your needs assessment area, in the needs assessment questions. And so I would made sure I spelled out very detailed why I qualify for priority 3, and I would either put it, I would either put my information and then put in parentheses priority 3, or I would just come out and say it. We qualify for priority 3 because we are serving students who blah 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 blah. So I would be very obvious in your answers on your questions of when you're showing that you do qualify for the priority points that you say you qualify for. If you just leave it up to the peer reviewer to kind of guess, then you're leaving it to chance as to whether they say yes, they do qualify for that priority, or no, they don't. So I would be very obvious if I qualified and how I qualified for it. Okay. And then we get into our questions. And so component 2, needs assessment. Highly recommend that when you are planning to answer these questions, if it was me, I would use the RFA itself, the written RFA, and I would answer all the questions in a Word document that I could easily copy and paste over into this electronic format. That's what I would do. You can do it however you want to do it. But just notice, I do want to show you, I want to show you the difference so that the electronic version of the application wouldn't be massive. It has a lot less details in the questions than what the actual RFA has. So let me show you what I mean. Give me just 1 second to find the right page. Okay, so this is component 2A. This question is component 2A. Notice it just has 3 bullet points. But if I pull up the actual application, which I'm going to do right now, and I go to page 39, if I can make this a little bigger, notice that, notice that component 2A took those bullets and broke it down. These details are what the peer reviewers are going to be looking for when they score your narrative. So make sure you include each of these items in your answer. Okay, some of them are even as detailed as saying that you should answer, that you should provide the information in order as to what's listed in the RFA. So highly recommend that you use the paper version or the electronic version of the RFA to determine what exact details you need to include in your narrative before you put it into eGAP. Because if I go back to the eGAP application, notice it's just the 3 bullets without all the details of what all you need to include under each of those bullets. So make sure that you're doing that. I don't believe there's a character limit. We thought that there was last year, but we had people that went way over. We thought it was like a 5,000 character limit, but we had people that went way over that. So put as much information as you need to put in there. I also did have someone ask if you could put charts into these questions, and I did test that yesterday. So if you notice up here, it's got paste. It has paste from Word and paste plain text. If you use this, if you go to a Word document and copy a table in a Word document and then use this paste from Word, it will upload the table into this box. So that's great news. You don't have to attach any separate data tables or anything like that. As long as you're copying and pasting them over from Word, you should be able to put it into these narrative boxes. So, so hopefully that will be beneficial to those of you who want to do that sort of thing. But yeah, be as detailed as you want. Do remember these are peer reviewers that are reading multiple applications, so I wouldn't go crazy and making each answer a book, because you want them to actually read it, but make sure you are covering each of those details. Okay, I'm just going to put something in here. All right. of course, you're going to do the same thing with question 2B, question 2C. I'm not going to go through each of these questions. The next part is the project design portion. Again, you're going to answer in detail. Make sure you're using the paper RFA to make sure you've got all the details that you need to include. Input your answers. Got 3B. Put in your response there. Put in your 3C. So we try to be really careful that everything matched up. Of course, there could potentially be a mistake somewhere, but hopefully everything matches. What's written here matches what's in the RFA. The last portion this year is component 5. That's going to be your adequacy of resources and sustainability. You're going to put your information in each of the narratives there. So like the first question is about staffing, your site building, safety, partner contributions. You put in all your information there, your transportation plans, your sustainability, and then that's the end. Okay, so once you have finished putting in all of your information, and you don't even have to finish, you can save this. I think you can do parts of it without having to do the entire amount. You can come back and add to it later, but you just make sure that you save. And again, I always like to be safe and hit the save button first, just to make sure it saves. And then you'll notice that it saved everything, and then I go back to my sections. You can also get to it if you, it's probably just going to confuse people, but you can also get to the sections by going all the way down here, and it will pull up each individual school. So I could go to the budget from this way. So remember, I'm on Amanda Ryland Elementary 21st Century Program. I could go to my budget tab here, or I can just go back to sections and make sure that it's the name that's on the drop-down menu and go to budget this way. So there's 2 different ways you can get to the budget. So that's the next section you're going to fill out. So I probably need to hurry up so we don't run out of time. All right, so here is where you're going to budget your funds. Keep in mind that it will allow you to add as much money as you want. It does not make you stick to the total amount that you qualify for. So you could put $600,000 worth of expenses in here. Please don't do that, because obviously that's not going to be allowable. It could actually get your application disqualified. Try to just put in funding items to get you to the full amount that you said you wanted to request in your grant. Okay, so to put in items, well, first let me focus on the indirect cost. Okay, so you actually don't have the ability, I don't believe, to change this. And LEA will already have an indirect cost rate that's been entered by LEA accounting. So you should be able to pull that information up, even though it's not entered in here yet. Or it may be entered in here if you're an LEA. Evidently, Alabama Aerospace does not have theirs entered in, at least not into the test site. It could be that it's in the actual eGAP site. But if the indirect cost rate has been entered by LEA accounting, then it will tell you the maximum amount that you're allowed to charge the grant for indirect costs. If you're a CBO and you don't have an indirect cost rate, you're allowed to charge up to 8%. Since you don't have the ability to manipulate these numbers right here, you'll just have to calculate that yourself and put it in as an expense. All right, so now I'm going to work on putting in some items into my budget. The RFA explains the differences between function codes and object codes. Okay, we have listed here for you the common. It should be all of the function codes that you would use for 21st century programming, but really out of these, usually you're only going to use a handful of these. Okay. If you were going to hire a nurse, then you might use 2140. So let's just go ahead and do that. So let's say that you want to hire a nurse for your after school program. So I'm going to click on, that's going to be a health service. So I'm going to click on modify. Jason asked about if since the indirect cost rate for FY27 is not available, can we use the FY26 rate for now? Absolutely, that is fine. Okay, so I'm going to click on modify. Okay. And I'm going to, now that I've got this pulled up, I'm going to click on add budget line item. All right, so it shows me that my function code here is health services, and I'm going to hire a nurse. This nurse is going to be an employee. Let's say I'm a school system. This nurse is an employee of our school system, and she's typically paid based on a salary. You could also contract with a person. So if you're going to pay them a salary, like an hourly wage, as a salaried employee with benefits, then you would choose you would choose an object code 010 through 199. So you would keep it where it's at. But if you were going to contract with a nurse, not pay them, you're just going to provide them with a contracted amount that didn't necessarily include benefits, and you're going to sign an actual contract with this person, then you would choose 300 through 399 purchase services. But for now, we're just going to say this is a salaried person. So I'm going to leave it where it's at. In my narrative, I'm going to put more information than I typically would in a budget narrative. Now, we always typically ask for you to provide a breakdown of their salary, which is actually more than we ask for with like consolidated applications for other federal programs. But because we are responsible in making sure that these expenses are reasonable and necessary, we need to see your breakdown. So we expect you to put something like, typically we would expect you to put something like school nurse, 2 hours per day, 5 days per week. And it could just be, you could put comma, or you could put an X, like times 2 hours a day times 5 days per week times 36 weeks equals, and then you would, oh, I'm sorry, and then you would, weeks at, let's say $40 an hour, $40 per hour equals, and so we've got basically 10 hours a week times 36 times 40. So I would pay that nurse 14,000, or I'm doing this kind of sloppy, 14,400. Whoops, $400. Okay, typically that's all we would expect you to put. But because this is part of a grant competition, and last year we had you have to explain your budget purchases in one area of the application and then come put them in the actual budget in a separate place, which was like redundant. And so for the first year only, we're going to ask you to provide more details as to why you need a school nurse. Why do you want a school nurse? So you're going to put just kind of a brief blurb here that says something to the effect of, you know, we plan to serve students who have medical needs, and a school nurse needs to be on site. Just something, it doesn't have to be great detail, but give us a reason for why you need to hire a school nurse, okay? Again, we don't normally ask for that much information from year to year to year, but because you're applying for this grant, we need to know what these expenses are for. And instead of us asking you to explain what the expenses are for in one place and then go do it again in another place, we're just going to ask you to do it all here in the budget narrative for this year only. This is different from last year. So if you applied for last year's grant, this is definitely a change, okay? You don't have to write a book, but provide enough detail to justify why you need a school nurse. why you need to have this expense, okay? And then over here, you need to make sure that this amount that you've put in your narrative matches what's over here. There's two ways you can do this. And so far we have one school nurse. Oh, by the way, you do need to tell me how many. So one school nurse at 2 hours per day. But let's say you're going to have two, okay? Forget the punctuation. It should be 2 school nurses, 2 hours a day, whatever. Let's say you're going to have 2. There's 2 ways you can do this. You can either put a 2 here, and say that there's a quantity of 2, and then put that they each are 14, because really that would be 14 now times 14,400 times 2 now. So it'd really be 28,800. So if you put 2 here and then you put your 14, sorry, I'm not used to doing this part very often, 14,400, I think that's correct. When I click off of it, now it's changed my total amount to 28,800. And I would need to make sure that matches what it says over here in the narrative. So I would need to, I don't know why it's now, oh, for some reason it took me out of the narrative. So let me go back in and edit again. If it won't let you click in the box, just hit that edit. And so now I need to put equals 2,800. Now, I don't particularly like doing it this way because you can list multiple positions that may get paid different amounts of money within the same area. So let's say this is not a good example where you would do that, because really what other medical health services would you put here? You're probably not going to hire more than a school nurse, but we'll just go ahead and leave this as is and we'll do another one. So I'm going to hit update. And now it has added that to my budget. So now notice that my budget is 28,800. It'll show that you have a negative amount because you don't have these funds yet. You won't actually have access to the funds until you've been awarded the grant and you've gone through us telling you what all needs to be fixed in your budget and all of that, and then giving you final approval. So it's going to show that you have a negative amount until you have final approval. That's going to happen many months down the road. No, there's a question that popped up. Are there 2 different budgets, like one budget for summer and one for academic year? No, there's not. You put it all together, but I will show you where you do indicate summer expenses. So give me a second, I'll show you that. Could we handle a custodian in a similar way? Yes, you could, but they would probably be considered like program staff. So let's do another one. So I'm going to add oh wait, actually I take that back. I'm still in health services. Well, okay, I don't have to go back. So now let's add a custodian. So a custodian would probably fall under 9130 extended day dependent care. So most of your expenses are going to fall under either 9130 or 9130 summer. Okay. This is going to be any of your staff that works for your after school program is going to fall under 9130, except for like those rare things like a nurse would fall under health services. If you had a guidance counselor, you could put that under 2120 guidance and counseling services. But most of the time, most of your staff that you're going to hire is going to fall under, or your regular staff, non-administrative staff is going to fall under 9130 extended day dependent care or 9130 summer. So let's just go ahead and click on 9130, and this would be our academic year. Again, it's going to be a salary expenses, and let's say that we are going to pay for a custodian. So I'm going to put in custodian. I'm going to break down their salary the same way I did earlier. Of course, they should be making, $40 an hour. It should be more in the $10 to $15 an hour area. And, work that out with the school as to whether they need to be there the entire time. You definitely don't need to be paying for a custodian that works during the regular school day. You can only pay them for the after school hours that they're working for 21st Century. But you have a breakdown of your custodian expenses. But then also, let's say you go ahead and you're hiring 7 enrichment teachers. And then you put in the breakdown for them. Break down their salary. So this custodian is making, $15 an hour. Your enrichment teacher could be making $40 an hour. Then you may also have like a lead teacher who makes $45 an hour. You can list all of those under salaries because they are all salaried employees that are working for your extended day dependent care program. But now, instead of putting a quantity, I wouldn't want to put 8, like in my current example, I've got 1 custodian and 7 enrichment teachers. I wouldn't want to put 8 because then it's going to take the total amount for the teachers and multiply that times 8 when that custodian is probably not going to make anywhere near what the teachers are making. So instead of putting a quantity and a cost, I'm just going to leave my quantity at 1 and then put the total amount that all of these different. So let's say the custodian comes out to be $4,300 per year, per academic year, and then my 7 enrichment teachers comes out to be $70,000 per year. It's helpful if you put the total amount, but we're going to calculate it anyway. And so you could say that your total cost here is $74,300. Whoops. Okay, and then when you click off of it, it goes ahead and adds it to your budget line total. And then you would hit create. And you'll, and so now you'll notice that your budget is up to $103,100 for your 2 expenses. Okay. All right. Now, why it's not showing you both of those expenses, I'm not exactly sure. So let me hit return. And now it's going to show me my overview. So it'll show me my expenses under health services, and it'll show me my expenses. So that's why, because it was just showing me the expenses under that 1 category. I also need to remember that I need to put in benefits for those salaried employees under 9130. Okay, so a couple of questions that have popped up. Would a secretary for the front office be 9130 or administrative? It depends. So from my experience, most people don't hire just a secretary. You may hire like a data entry person who's over your easy reports. That person would be considered administrative. Yeah, a secretary would be considered an administrative expense, but just keep in mind you only have 30, you can only spend 30% of your funds on administrative and indirect costs. So I haven't seen too many people just have a front office secretary. Usually that person is going to do other things as well, like be more of a data entry person or something like that. So clarifying, this would not be a data entry person. So what would be for safety and security? I've never seen anyone have that in their application. I'm not saying you can't spend money on that if it's a need, but safety and security. So if that's the reasoning for it, then let me think about that for a second. Because I know that you can hire like a security guard if needed, if it's a need in the area. It would be safety and security, checking out, answering the parent phone calls, etc. Yeah, typically any kind of position like that would be considered an administrative expense. And here's the reasoning why. So your extended day dependent care, that's going to be your people that actually provide services to the students, usually, typically, for the programming. Now, I know custodian doesn't really fit into that. Your custodian actually really should fall under operations and maintenance. But typically your 9130 expenses are going to be like your teaching staff, your enrichment staff, and things like that. It's not necessarily going to be people who are just doing data or working as a secretary or something like that. That's going to fall under your administrative services, just like a secretary for any of the other title programs would fall under an administrative position for your other title programs. Okay. All right. Let's see if I have any other questions that have popped up that I missed. Okay, we have about 18 more minutes. All right, so does everybody feel comfortable with the budget on how to do this? Oh, and don't forget, we want you to put in an explanation of why you need these 7 teachers or why you need this custodian. Don't just list it and assume that we understand why. So it doesn't have to be a book again, but this is where you can explain why you need this expense and how this expense relates to your program goals and objectives, why it's a need. Okay. If you go to page, if you go to page 47 of the RFA, that's where it talks about the budget. And you'll notice, let me go to that really quick so we can look at it together. So 47. Okay, so here's our budget. So you need to have all of your proposed expenditures in your budget. Each budget line item must include a narrative that explains how the line item is tied to the goals, objectives, strategies, and activities outlined in one or more components of the application details and the multi-year program design and performance form. So in other words, why are you purchasing this? Why are you hiring this person? What goal is this going to help you meet? What objective is this going to help you meet? And so you need to be able to tie that together in your narrative. It's the only year you'll be asked to do that again. Typically, we don't ask for all that information in a budget narrative, but it was just to try to help keep you from having to do double duty. Okay, there's a question that's popped up in the chat. Could program directors be responsible for all data entry? Yes, they can, if that's what you choose to do. You can definitely do that. Just make sure you include that in your job description. But yeah, we kind of give you some freedom. We say you have to have, well, okay, let me go back and really think about that question. They could, but I wouldn't advise it, because data entry could include daily attendance, and that sort of thing. So typically a program director would not be responsible for things like daily attendance. Now, if you're talking about making sure that GEPRA data is uploaded, you know, that things have been pulled over accurately from PowerSchool and things like that, then yes, a program director can do that type of thing. But a program director typically needs to be more of a supervisor position and making sure that everything runs smoothly from a supervising point of view. They should have people under them that actually do most of the work. So, so she clarified easy reports submitted and PowerSchool data. Yes, a program director should definitely be responsible for that. But just keep in mind that's not something that they're going to have to do like on a daily basis or anything like that. That's something that only would be done at certain times of the year So I guess where I'm getting with this is that you need to go by like the guidelines that are in the RFA about how many hours a program director really should work, depending on how many sites they have. You can't say, well, our program director is going to work 40 hours a week because they're going to be responsible for data entry. That's not really going to fly because really, that's not something that is done throughout the whole year. It's only done at certain times of the year. And we actually are in the process of building an API between Easy Reports and PowerSchool where the data will automatically come over. So as soon as that happens, there will be hardly anything that the program director would have to do when it comes to data entry because it's going to be automated. Now, you would have to be responsible for making sure that kids get marked as 21st century in PowerSchool. But again, that's going to happen. That's going to be a good bit of work at the beginning of the year for like a day or two. And then after that, just randomly as kids enter the program throughout the year. So just keep things like that in mind. Okay. Hopefully I answered that question, but also in the RFA, it does break down the different places, the different types of, you're welcome, the different types of funding codes, the function codes, I'm sorry, and then the object codes. And if you have any questions about this, usually LEAs are used to this. Now the LEA may not be used to having to put those extra details in the narrative. So if you have like a CSFO or someone helping you with the budget portion of your application and they're balking at the extra information we're asking you to add, just try to please explain to them that we kind of basically combined two areas of the application to make it where you weren't having to do repetitive, put in repetitive information, and that we have asked you to put in more information than you typically would in your budget narrative, just that for the grant competition only. Okay. All right, I'm going to get out of this and go over the last little part here. So that is your budget. Again, it will keep adding until you get to your total amount. It will let you go over your total amount, so just kind of keep an eye on that. It'll let you do that until we final approve it, which could be many months down the road. So just keep an eye to make sure that your total does not go over what you qualify for, what you're eligible for. It also doesn't need to be under it either. So if it said that you were eligible for $350,000, then you need to make your budget add up to $350,000. You need to spend every penny. It doesn't need to be $348,000 because that's almost like having an incomplete application. You need to budget all of your funds. Don't go over, don't go under. Okay. You can always add money to materials and supplies until you get it to where it's at the right amount. All right, last section that you really need to worry about. So I'm going to go back to the sections here. And so the last thing that you have to be concerned with for each application is your related documents. Now, unfortunately, if I clicked on these templates, they don't work because this is the test site. So they should work in the actual eGAP site, but for some reason they don't upload them into the test site. These documents are also can be found on the 21st Century website, and they're actually give you more options. Like there's some fillable, versions and things like that. But if you want to download the templates from here, you are welcome to do so. And then you need to upload your documents here under upload new. So you'll just click on, I don't know if this is going to work or not. I didn't test it yesterday. Yeah, so you upload new, you'll upload your data file and then name it. So you can name it based off of Form 1, Form 2, Form 3. But I'm going to hit cancel because you can upload multiple documents under each link. So for example, where is it? So your memorandum of understanding, Form 3. You may have 2 or 3 MOUs that need to be uploaded as part of the grant requirement. So you would upload each of them separately and then name them. We appreciate it when you name them accordingly. So if it's an MOU with child nutrition, then you might put CNP or child nutrition MOU, transportation MOU, joint partnership MOU. So it does help us to know what we're clicking on when we go and view a document. And then your contracts, you upload down here at the bottom under additional documents. So the ones that are up here and required, you have to upload a document under the required documents. No matter what, upload the document. So let me try to give an example. Okay, Form 6, private school consultation form. Let's say you don't have any private schools in the attendance area of the schools you plan to serve. What do you need to do? You still need to fill out the private school consultation form, check the box that says there are no private schools in our area, and upload it. If you don't upload it, your application is going to be immediately disqualified. Okay? If you don't upload all of your forms and they are not all completed, you are disqualified. So the very first step in the application process that we go through is checking to make sure that all of these forms have been completed. Now, your peer reviewers are actually going to score forms. Let me make sure this is right. They're actually going to score Form 8, 9, and 10. So that's your projected weekly schedule, your Form 9, and your job descriptions. Those are actually going to be scored by the peer reviewers. Forms 1 through 7 and any contracts you might have uploaded, we are going to look at the State Department, and we're going to look at each one to make sure that they've all been completed in full and signed by the appropriate people. If that has not happened, your application is disqualified from going to the next round. So it is very important that you make sure that all the forms are filled out accurately and fully, and that your links work. Like, check when you say that you've uploaded something, check to make sure you uploaded the correct document. I believe you should be able to click on it once you've uploaded it to make sure it is the correct document. We had people last year who were disqualified that uploaded the wrong thing into one of these places, and since they didn't have all of the required information, they were disqualified. So please be careful about these documents and making sure that you have uploaded them. They've all been signed by the correct people. Something we saw very frequently last year, the community partnership agreement. There is a place on that community partnership agreement for those people to sign the document saying that they are a community partner. We had several forms that were uploaded that had a list of who the partners were and what services they were provided, but there was no signature. That's incomplete. They are disqualified from the grant. Okay. So don't leave anything undone. It's really, really important because it's heartbreaking to disqualify a really great application just because of logistics. But in order to be fair to everyone, we have to kind of stick to those rules. And any grant competition that you've ever done has similar rules to that. Everything has to be done. Everything has to be answered. Everything has to be signed. Okay. After your presentation, I have a couple of questions. Okay, yeah. I definitely have time to answer any questions you guys have after this is over. Okay, so once you've uploaded all of your forms, I'm going to go back to my main section. Then, once I've done everything for Amanda Ryland Elementary, I've got to do it all again for Carla White High School. Got to answer all the same narrative, all the same application details questions. I've got to create a full budget. I've got to upload all the related documents, even if the document is exactly the same as the document I uploaded for Amanda Ryland Elementary. I still have to upload it under Carla White High School, because again, when the system portions the applications out for judging, it does it by site, not by subgrantee. So you don't have one person that reads all of that site's applications. You may have 5 different people that read, or actually it's three readers per site. So you may have 15 different people that look at your applications and don't look at 2 from your site, from your subgrantee, two of the same, I'm sorry. They don't look at 2 site applications from the same subgrantee. So make sure that you don't leave anything out. You treat each one like it's its own individual competition, because each one is judged individually, not based on the subgrantee as a whole. Okay. Do we need a separate Form 7 with their signature, or do they all sign the same one? So they typically would all sign the same one. Now, and let me go back to related documents. So typically they all sign the same one. However, if you upload 2 and you have like 3 names on one of them and 2 on another, and the signatures there, I don't have a problem with that. That's fine. You can upload more than 1 document. So like if you got a staff member, you're going to go to this side of town and get signatures from the west side, and you're going to go get signatures from the east side, and you want to do it on 2 separate forms, you are welcome to do that. Just make sure they're signatures. And yes, we can tell if y'all forge people's signatures. It's very obvious a lot of times if one person signs the names under each thing. And yes, that has been done several times. So please make sure you're actually getting accurate signatures. You can set it up in DocuSign for them to sign if you know how to do that, but that may get complicated since you can fit so many names on one form, but that is also an option. Any place where we've asked for a wet signature, you also can use DocuSign, but we expect it to have like if you're using DocuSign, it needs to be obvious that it's DocuSign. In other words, it's got the details about when it was signed, it was done through DocuSign, it's got all that information attached to it, not just an electronic signature. That's not, the only time an electronic signature is accepted in most of these cases is if it's done through DocuSign, or I think there's also a way to do it through Adobe Acrobat as well. There's also a signature if you have the right kind of Adobe Acrobat, but it has to be one of those programs that like provides the verification that the actual person who was supposed to sign it signed it. Okay. All right, last thing I want to go over as far as the eGAP application goes is how to submit it. I'm going to go back to sections. And so notice the status that I'm in. I am currently in draft completed status. And so when I'm ready, when my application is ready to go and I think it's perfect, I've uploaded all my documents, I've done my budget, it's as good as I can get it, then I'm going to hit draft completed. Okay. So it says status cannot be changed. 1 or more validation errors exist. Click here to view the errors. Let's just see. Oh, lots of errors. So basically it's telling me that there's a whole lot of stuff that I didn't fill in. Errors that have this red error, those have to be fixed. So there's some questions I didn't answer that were marked with an asterisk. There's some other thing. Oh, I didn't upload these mandatory forms. So it's not going to let me go to the next level. I apologize. But it's good that I got to show you this. Now, warnings, you can submit an application if a warning is here, but make sure you read through and make sure it's not something that needs to be done as part of a requirement of the application. But once I've cleared all these up, I'm going to go back to sections page. Once all of my errors are cleared, then I'm going to hit draft completed. It will then, and notice it says here that this status change can be done by the LEA 21st Century Director. So whoever is in your organization as the LEA 21st Century Director, and you can have multiple people. So if you notice, it says that these 4 people have that role. So any of those people can hit draft completed. Then it's going to go to, I'm almost positive it's going to ask for the CFO. It's going to ask for the fiscal representative to approve it. That's the next step. And so you need to have a fiscal representative in place that can read through it, go through the budget, make sure everything looks good, and then they have to approve it. Then once that person approves it, then it goes to the, I want to say it's the LEA authorized user, I believe is what it says. That person has to approve it. So it has to go through 3 people approving it before it is officially submitted to the ALSDE. Please make sure that you do not wait till the day that the application is due to submit it and expect those 3 people to also approve it. I think we had 2 or 3 applications for our last cohort that did not even get considered because someone in that chain of people who had to approve it either couldn't get to their computer, they had a power outage, their computer broke down or locked up, they were sick, had a heart attack, whatever the case may be, somebody couldn't hit the approval button in time to meet the deadline, and they didn't meet the deadline, and so their application wasn't reviewed. So I strongly encourage you to submit a week ahead of time if you can, at least several days ahead of time if you can, and make sure that the people that you have listed as approvers for your application know that it's coming and know the importance of them clicking that approval button in order for the application to be submitted. So that is super, super important. All right, so I think I've covered everything. If any of our seasoned people, if I've left anything out, please feel free to speak up and put it in the chat. And now I'm just happy to answer any questions you may have. Let's talk about eGAP applications first, since that's what this session is about, and then I'll probably stop the recording. Well, no, we'll just continue. We'll just continue until all the questions are answered. Okay. So what contracts, so there's a question, what contracts need to be included right now? Evaluator, question mark. So technically the RFA says you don't have to include any of your contracts to apply for the grant. If you get the grant, if you get awarded the grant, you're supposed to upload the contract for any contracted services you have. I think it says within 30 days of you actually getting the grant. But you don't have to ahead of time. One reason why you might want to is because sometimes the contract provides details as to what exactly that person is going to be doing. So let's say that you're going to, well, you've got your external evaluator. That's pretty common sense. We know what the external evaluator is for. If you want to go ahead and upload their contract, you're welcome to. If you want to wait, you don't have to do it yet. But let's say that you plan to hire a STEM specialist to come in and teach students 2 days a week for the 36 weeks of your program, and you put into your budget narrative that you're going to pay a STEM specialist $60,000, and that's all you really have in your budget narrative. I'm going to question that. I'm going to question that expense. I'm going to want to know who, like, what is this company? What is this STEM? Who is this STEM company? What company is it? Do they use best practices? Are they evidence-based? Do they use evidence-based curriculum? Is this a person who has experience teaching students after school? How much are you paying them per hour? What does 60,000 actually break down to? So a lot of times the contract will provide those details that you wouldn't typically necessarily put in fully into the budget narrative. So what you could do is, if that's the case, if the contract will better describe what this person does and their qualifications, then you could upload like an unsigned version of the contract so that we can review it. And then if you get the grant, then you can present it to that person and actually have them sign it and upload the actual signed contract. Okay, next question. What if we have a new superintendent beginning March 1st? Will both superintendents need to approve eGAP and sign related documents? Our current superintendent's official last day is February 27th. I would say your new superintendent needs to do it. The application is not due until March the 20th. And so that should give you plenty of time, hopefully, to get that application signed. Because we really do want the superintendent that's going to be in place when the grant is being executed to be the person who signs off on it. Now, just to be absolutely honest, will we know that one is rolling off and another one's coming on? We may not know. We may not recognize that, we don't know the names of all the superintendents and all the LEAs of the state. But it's really in your best interest to get the superintendent that's going to be in place when you're actually doing the grant to be the one that signs off on it, because you know then that you have their backing. You know that they are going to support you and your program. And we've had situations in the past where either a superintendent or a principal was all gung-ho to have a 21st century program. They signed off on it, and then several months or a year later, they left, and the new person coming in to take their place did not want to have anything to do with 21st century. And it was nothing but problems from that point forward. So it's really in your best interest to get the new superintendent to sign off on it and understand what the expectations are so that you don't run into problems in the future. Now, in my opinion, why would a superintendent or a principal not want a 21st century program? I don't know. Like, to me, it's a given that it's a great thing, but not everybody sees it that way. So yeah, I would try to get your new person to sign it. Sorry, that was like a ramble. I rambled a lot. Tend to do that. All right. What other questions? Okay. She says she's talked with her new one and he's excited. That's awesome. There's nothing better than having administrators, your superintendent, and your principals on board with your 21st century program, because they really, that's why we now are requiring our principals to attend a meeting for 21st century at the beginning of the year so that we can really try to make sure that they see the benefit of having an after-school program at their site, and that they hopefully will support you as much as possible so that your program will be very successful. So that's really, really important. Okay. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see who all's still in here. Does anyone else have any questions either about eGAP or about the application itself before we finish today? Okay, I think something just popped up. Hold on. Where'd it go? Okay. Should the program director be a federal program staff member? In a lot of cases, they are. They don't have to be, but a lot of LEA subgrantees, it's the same person. It just really depends. It depends on the size. It depends on the number of duties that federal program person already does. We've got some small school systems where the federal programs person is also like the homeless person and the equitable services person, and they have multiple hats, and whether they can adequately take on yet another thing, it just depends. A lot of times an LEA subgrantee or even a CBO, it will be someone who's kind of from the central office or from the main office, because since a program director is typically a part-time position and not normally a full-time unless you have 5 or more sites, sometimes it may be hard to find a good person for that position who is willing to settle for a part-time pay. So that's why a lot of times LEAs or CBOs will just make it part of a person's job that already works for that school system or that organization. So, it's really up to you and your situation, however it works out best. Hopefully I answered that.
Amanda, I have a couple
Yes.
of questions
Okay.
specifically to the RFA. In component 3B,
Mhm.
when it asks us to cite the sources, besides in our narrative citing the author and maybe where we got it, do they want an actual little cited section at the bottom?
I think you can just do it within the paragraph of where where you got that information from. I don't think you have to have like a works cited page or anything like that. You can just do it within the narrative or where you're talking about that particular resource. And so for those of you who don't know what she's talking about, is talking about your curriculum and how, your curriculum, that your activities that you provide for your students need to be evidence-based, research-based. Uh, the feds are really big on this, and so they ask you to cite the sources, and there's actually a portion that goes into I think of what it's called. Sorry. There's a term for it that my brain is not wanting to pull up right now. Let's see. Measures of effectiveness. So the federal government is really big on this, the theory of the measures of effectiveness, and that information is actually earlier on in the grant. If you want to look at that, but they do expect that the practices you do, now I'm not talking about like PE activities and things like that, but especially if you're teaching any kind of math, language, arts, science, anything like that, we want to make sure that the activities that you're doing with the students are research-based and are using best practices. When I first came onto this program, one of the first things I read, and so I have a science background. I used to work for ALSDE for the state. I ran the biology program for the high school for 10 years for the state. So science is like my wheelhouse. I'm very rusty now, but that's something I'm very interested in. And so when that's something that I often will look into. If somebody says they're going to use a certain curriculum for STEM or science, I often will look it up and just see, I haven't heard of that before. Let me look it up and just see what they do. And so, but the feds are, what I was going to say was when I first took this job and reading our state evaluation, it actually showed that kids who participated in 21st century's scores in science went down. And that was a huge red flag to me, that it's really, really important in things like science that you don't have people teaching that don't understand the science and the concepts behind what they're teaching, because they can often actually create misconceptions and they can actually do more damage than they are doing good. And so that's kind of that was a big thing to me that I noticed in our evaluations, that I wanted to make sure that I tried my best to try to combat. So, not everybody can teach science. Not everybody is equipped to teach math. So that's why we try to encourage you guys to hire certified teachers for those types of things, and to use curriculum that actually is research-based, and has, those best practices, and are based upon those components of the measures of effectiveness, which are described it's in the RFA, and it's also described by the feds. Hopefully I answered
And I also have one.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. And one more question about component 3C. It's talking about student and family support.
Yes.
And it says the projective services, including meals and activities.
Right. Okay.
Can you elaborate on that? It doesn't mean activities that you addressed in 3B, correct?
Correct. So this is specific to, this is mainly specific to families, but also to students as well. So let me kind of look at each of these bullets on their own. So the first one, it says fully describe the projected services, including meals and activities to be provided to support students, public and private, and their families, including how many family members will be served. Okay, so This would be like your parent and family engagement activities. Um, Now, it does say including meals. So this is not saying you have to provide meals like during parent family engagement. It's saying you can if you have that resource available to you. If you've got, so there are certain circumstances where you can use 21st century funding for things like that, but it has to be pre-approved by the state. But oftentimes you'll use your community partners to provide a meal. So you might talk about that. You might say, we have a partnership with this restaurant down the road, and they're going to provide appetizers for our parent and family engagement, our fall parent and family engagement activity. So again, anything like that outside the box that you provide. Also here, you might talk about any other services that you're providing to families of these students. So it could be some of those activities. Well, really, let me think about this for a second. So the activities you talk about primarily in 3B are mostly activities that are related to student engagement, I believe. So this is 3C is where you might talk about any additional activities you provide to families. So like if you're going to do a GED program, like a 9-week GED program for family members of the students, you might talk about that here in 3C. Anything like that. If you're going to have a food bank as part of your service learning projects, you might want to mention it there, and the families can come and get food from the food bank at certain times. I mean, there's all kinds of things you could put there. And again, it's not necessarily anything that's required, but if you can think outside the box and come up with things that you can do for the families, then it's definitely will help your cause in getting the grant. Additional social and behavioral services that will be provided. So like if you're going to have mentors come in and mentor the students, if you're going to have a guidance counselor that works, like if you have an issue with mental health in the schools that you're serving and you want to bring in a guidance counselor that's going to work with certain students on certain days, that's where you could talk about that sort of thing. So that's not necessarily an activity that you're providing for all the kids, but it's a service that you are using 21st century funds to provide for the kids who need it. So that's something there that you could talk about. Types of snacks and meals that will be served daily, how they'll be prepared, and how they will be funded. So this is where you would talk about, hopefully, your relationship with your CMP program or the CMP program for the schools that you're serving. And of course, hopefully you'll have an MOU to back that up. They're going to provide those snacks each day. And talk about how they're going to prepare them, or like we have some situations where if the site is not at the school, they'll have someone that goes and picks up the snacks from the CMP program and brings it back to the site. So they might describe how that's going to work. Any of those types of details is what you could talk about there. And then again, it talks about specific activities that will be provided to address literacy and related education needs of the participant family. So there's your GED classes, there's your EL classes, there's your classes teaching parents how to read with their children, that sort of thing. You would include that in that component 3C. So hopefully that helped. Good. Okay. I want to make sure I'm not skipping anybody. The district has an assistant director. Can you put both names, contact information in the subgrantee contact information page? I believe it only, it just has a place for you to put one person's name. So you probably would need to put your program director. If you don't have that person hired yet, then you would need to probably put whoever at your LEA or organization is over the grant until you get those positions into place. You can always update it later if you get someone else, but I think it just gives you a space to put one person's information in there. Also note that on the cover page, that Form 1 that you're going to upload into the related documents or the required documents, it asks for contact information of the person who's actually putting the grant into eGAP, so that if we have a situation where we need to contact someone, like, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but let's say we did have some extra time and noticed that someone, before the grant was officially due and had been submitted, if we noticed that someone uploaded the wrong document, we might reach out to that person and say, hey, we just noticed that instead of Form 3, you uploaded your income tax return from last year, something like that. Now, don't depend on that, because we don't typically have a lot of extra time to go looking at these. We've got a lot on our plate, our whole team does, but we need to know who to reach out to that's actually putting the information into eGAP. Okay. Did you say we need Form 3 MOUs now for the partners on Form 7? No. Okay. If money is being needed for Cohort 27. Okay. That is a very weighted question. Okay. So, MOUs. The MOUs we expect to see uploaded in the grant, I believe it details them. Hold on, give me a second. Let me find the page. There's a couple of places that talk about MOUs. Okay. Page 49, where it's going over the documents you need to upload, it lists 3 potential MOUs that you might need to upload. So, an MOU between the 21st Century Center and the LEA superintendent and principals. So that's something that everybody should be uploading. MOU between the 21st Century Center and each co-applicant. So if you're applying for the grant jointly with a co-applicant, there should be an MOU between the primary and the joint applicant to explain who is doing what and how it's a partnership. MOU between a non-LEA 21st Century and its partnering LEA. So if you're a CBO or an FBO, you have to upload an MOU saying that you're partnering with the LEA of the schools that you're serving. That's a requirement. You have to partner with the LEA. And the reason for that is because there is student data that you have to be able to collect, like academic data and attendance data and things like that only the LEA is going to have access to. And so you have to have a partnership with the LEA of the schools that you're serving. So that lets us know that you do have an active partnership and you both understand what's required. Now,
just to interject while you're there.
Yeah.
So that's the reason I was asking, because on that same page on 49, we've got Form 4 and 5 that the principal and superintendent are signing. So that's why I kind of got confused with that first bullet.
Yeah. So, so the superintendent support certification and the principal support certification are they're kind of similar, but they are different because they're not an official like MOU or contract. They really just kind of go over the expectations of the superintendent and the expectations of the principal that your MOU may not talk about. So, so think of it this way. The superintendent support certification Forms 4 and Forms 5 are the State Department and the federal requirements of superintendents and principals. But when you guys do an MOU between your 21st Century program and your superintendents and principals, you may have requirements outside of that. You may have additional things that you work out as requirements on both parties. You may have less, but that's more, the MOU is more tailored to your specific situation. It's not what we've said as a State Department they have to provide. It's what you guys have agreed to when you've met to say, okay, we're applying for this grant to serve your students. Here's what we need from you and we need you to commit to, and here's what we're going to provide, and how can we work best together. So that's what that MOU is for. Okay, and then another part of that question that said something about partners on Form 7. So that's the community partnership agreement. You shouldn't, so your community partners, you don't necessarily have to have an MOU with them. You can if you want to, but it's not a requirement. Usually your community partners are people like the local bank, and they've agreed that they're going to come in and talk to the students twice a year about how to budget their checking account, or how to open a checking account, or how to do a budget. We're going to partner with the local grocery store, and they're going to provide snacks to our students 1 day a week. We're going to partner with the church down the road, and they're going to provide male mentors for some of our male students who are having issues with discipline and referrals and things like that. They're going to provide a strong male leadership example, and they're going to provide that, and it's like a free thing. So those are going to be your community partners. You don't necessarily need to do an MOU with them. You would need to have an MOU with your joint partner for your application, because you're both like responsible for the grant. You're both responsible for both writing it and implementing the grant if you apply as a joint partner.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Mrs. Allen, also, since you're there with the local partners, you made me think of the Mobile County Health Department. I had them on Form 7 before, but it would be better to do the MOU with them. There's no money involved. They come in and provide lead awareness, testing of soil and things like that, just for, a couple of instances.
Absolutely.
So that's who I need that kind of MOU with. So
yeah,
my one
absolutely.
I
will say that you have a much stronger leg to stand on if you do go through the process of an MOU than whether you just have them sign that little Form 7 saying, yeah, we'll do this. If you actually have like a formal MOU in place, then if they don't provide the services that you agree to, it's like, you can kind of hold it over their head a little bit easier because, we have this agreement, and, it's more of a formal agreement, but it's not a requirement for anybody except for those things that are listed there in the application.
Okay, all right. That
yeah.
makes sense now, because I was also thinking of the Mobile Arts Council, who we had services provided. No money was involved on our end, but they provide our gardening club. Our 4-H club is now involved and associated with them. They provided a music teacher, a percussionist teacher this year for us as well. So she was asking me, because she was applying for more grants, whether or not we were interested in that partnership. And of course we said yes. So I would do an MOU with the Mobile Arts Council, correct?
Right.
Okay.
You would. Yeah. And when you say partnership, do you mean like joint applicant or like community partner, but kind of
community partner?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Not a joint applicant. No, ma'am.
Especially if they're providing all of that, that's a lot that they've agreed to provide. So I would definitely want to do an MOU in that case.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for clarifying. That helped tremendously.
You're very welcome. Very, very welcome. Okay. Okay, I'm trying to make sure I'm not skipping anything. We don't have a program director who is paid because ours is the LEA federal program staff. Is that okay? Yes, that's fine. Yeah, you don't have to use 21st Century funds to pay for your program director's salary if it's just part of their everyday job. But then on the flip side of that, you could pay a portion of that person's salary with 21st Century funds if you wanted to. So if their main job, if they spend 90% of their time doing other things, but they spend 10% of their time doing 21st Century, you are welcome to charge 10% of that person's salary to the 21st Century grant. So just keeping that in mind. But if you don't want to charge them, you don't have to. Absolutely not. That's awesome. That's great. Okay. And so just somebody said, we'll upload those for the principal and superintendent. Yes. And just keep in mind, if you're serving more than one school, you'll need that form, the principal certification form, Form 5. You'll need one for each principal that you're serving. So that's for that particular site. So if you're serving more than one school at a site, then you would need to upload that principal support certification form for each principal. Okay. And then also keep in mind, I just want to point this out. Your superintendent is probably going to be the same whether you have 1 site or 5 sites. Don't just upload that Form 4 to one of the grants, but not the other ones, because then you're going to disqualify all the ones that you didn't upload it to. So just don't forget that, treat each one like it's an individual application, even if the form is exactly the same from site to site to site, like the superintendent support certification, which probably would be exactly the same if you had 5 sites for all 5 sites. You still need to upload it to each of the 5 sites, not just one of them. So I just want to point that out. Okay, do we have to have an MOU for the principal and the superintendent since they are district employees? Yes. So this time we are saying that we do want you to do that. This would be between the 21st century site and the superintendent and principals. So that way you will have, it's just a way to make sure that everybody is on board for your 21st century site and supporting that 21st century site. So, so yes, even though they're district employees. So for another example of this is if you're going to if your child nutrition program is providing snacks, you should have an MOU between the 21st century program and your child nutrition program, saying that even though it's in the same LEA, they need to provide, you need to have that written out as to exactly what they're going to provide for your programming. There should be an MOU for that. Okay, but they are signing the assurances and other forms. Yes, they are.
Jump in for a minute.
Huh?
Can I
Yeah, you
jump
can.
in?
Absolutely.
Because I guess I'm a little bit confused because if they're district departments, like our child nutrition program,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to provide services because we have specific things already in place in our district to ensure that that happens.
Okay.
It's a district process and procedure. We have to have an MOU for district processes and procedures?
So, yes, for things like that. So,
Okay.
so for example, let me try to think of the best way to put this and the reasoning behind it. Give me just 1 second. Okay. I was trying to see if the wording kind of went over this.
We'll work together.
Okay.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
we can work to get it together for that. But yeah, it is something that we require in this case is MOUs between those different. So like CMP may not be the best example because there's not necessarily an exchange of funds, but let's say transportation, there might be a exchange of funds between the LEA transportation and the 21st century program to provide those extra transportation services. In cases like that, an MOU would be what's appropriate because it's within the organization and there is going to be an exchange of funds between the 2 programs. So you're using funds from outside of the regular programming funds that would supply those things. And so that's why there needs to be an MOU in place. Now, child nutrition, a lot of districts do an MOU with child nutrition, but if there's not necessarily an exchange of funds in place, I don't think it's like one of those things that we're going to disqualify the grant for not having in there. But it's just kind of one of those highly recommended things to do because we have had situations where, especially like, for example, summer programming, not all LEAs offer child nutrition services during the summer, but they may have an agreement that, and when getting ready for this grant, they may have a verbal agreement with their child nutrition program that they're going to provide breakfast and lunch for the students during the summer program for the 21st century program. But then when it comes time to actually do it, they no longer want to do it. And if they don't have if you don't have an MOU in place to back up that we had this agreement, then you don't have a leg to stand on. They can easily back out. So it's things like that where we highly recommend having an MOU in place, because, you know, the school year is not usually, like you said, that's usually processes that's kind of already built in. Now, if it's between a CBO and an LEA, then yeah, you definitely would need to have a contract in place there. But it may not be as much of a requirement during the school year, but especially you want to be safe like during the summer, because those programs are optional for school systems to provide summer feeding. So you definitely want to have that kind of worked out before you do your grant, because, you know, if you're going to have kids at your center from 8 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon, you got to be able to feed them. And if your child nutrition program is not willing to provide that food, then where is it going to come from? So you kind of have to have that in place. Okay. All right. Not the food bank, right? I'm not really sure what the food bank comment, okay, comes from. What portion of what I said that's referring to? Ms. McShann, if you want to unmute yourself, if you're still here. Okay, I don't think she's in here anymore. I'm not sure.
I'm still here.
Oh,
I'm
there
still
you
here,
are.
Mrs.
Okay, yeah.
Trying to, we get daily snacks from the food bank. Do we need an MOU with them?
I would say yes. I would. Or is there an exchange? There's no exchange of funds or anything.
No, ma'am.
Okay, yeah. Again, I would say it's a good idea to have that MOU in place. Is it something that we're going to require and check for? No, not necessarily, but it is wise on your part to have that in place so that you both agree to it. It's just kind of, and then having that MOU in place and uploading it shows that not only are you saying this is going to be provided, but here's my evidence that this food bank has said that they are going to provide our snacks, right? Instead of you just saying it, showing that an MOU has been uploaded, that there's a formal agreement between you and the food bank, just kind of backs up that you're actually going to do what you say you're going to do. So not only does it help protect you in ensuring that it's a little bit harder for them to get out of that agreement later on down the line. Now, would it be held against them in some kind of court? I don't know. But it definitely provides you with more, it provides you with more support if things don't go the way they said they would happen. And then again, of course, if you have that uploaded, it just shows that grant reviewer that that we do actually have this in place, and we're not just saying we're going to do it. Yeah.
So, man, I'm just going to throw this out.
Okay.
When we have had a MOU in the past during the summer, and the superintendent made a late decision to close the schools earlier, we had a MOU. However, we were not able to hold them to it because we didn't have extra support. In other words, prior to you, folks would say, I'm going to leave that up to you all.
I gotcha.
So here's some things that you can do in addition to. So maybe you should go to a community place. Maybe you can go here. Maybe you can ask a church. Maybe you can ask. So we really had to rectify that on our own, regardless. Okay. And I know the MOU is supposed to do that, but nobody wanted to override their superintendent.
Yeah. All I can do is speak from my point of view. When this has come up in the past, and I don't think it was with you guys, but it was with another site, you know, I was happy to kind of like facilitate a conversation between the two. Now legally, I don't know how accountable you could hold an LAA to it if they have a really good justification of why they're not going to run their child nutrition program. But we will try to facilitate and help with that. But there are other things that we can recommend. And I have kind of a good bit of knowledge of it because my husband works for child nutrition for the state. And so there are other avenues that we have provided professional development on, of other sources you can seek to provide those meals if the LEA you're working with is just absolutely not going to run their summer program. So we will try to support in every way we can. And so you're right. I mean, having that MOU in place is not an absolute guarantee that you're going to get the services that have been promised. But and I don't know if you got a lawyer, if it could be taken that far or not. You know
We
what I
weren't
mean?
gonna
Like,
go there.
don't
We
know.
just did what we had to do, and that was
I'm
yield
absolutely
to the
not a
king.
lawyer. Yeah. I'm not a lawyer, so I really don't know the legal aspects of how that MOU, how accountable people can be made as to what they put into and sign to. But
Yeah.
it's just kind of one of those things that you hope that they
Right.
will that they will honor the
Honor
commitment
it.
made.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I get it. I just know
Yeah.
that it happened, so we just was SOL. But anyway, that's good
Yeah.
information to know that we have your support.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I even went and presented at the Child Nutrition Conference, begging them to serve you guys as much as possible during the summer, and then got Dr. Killingsworth to agree to us allowing you guys to pay for summer feeding with 21st Century funds if there's no other options. And so there's several options that we're going to try first before we do that. But if it comes down to it and the only way those kids can get fed is by using 21st Century funds to feed them, then we'll do that. It's just, it has to be pre-approved so that we can try those other options first and go through all those other methods to try to get the kids fed in other more cost-effective ways than using 21st Century funds for that. But we do allow that if it's needed. So
one thing on that one, if we know up front that they're not going to be open, well, we don't know right now, but I'm assuming that they're going to be closed because the district do close on Fridays.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that they may put in there? Is that going to be feasible to say that?
Yes,
that's the
you could
only
actually
time,
go ahead and put that in your budget.
Okay.
Again, I would make sure you specify with state approval. But yes, so that's a great point to bring up. So some summer feeding programs only go from Monday through Thursday. And then we've had the situation where the kids, you had to find another source of food on Fridays, or there's like field trips and you had to come up with a way to feed the kids on a field trip. And so if you know that's going to be a situation, you already have experienced that in the past, and you've already spoken with Child Nutrition and they have no intention of opening their programs on Fridays, then you could go ahead and put that in your budget. I would just be sure to explain it and say, we would like to budget this amount of money towards food for Fridays for our summer program, and then explain why. And then just understand that, it's got to be approved by the state. And we're going to try to, there's suggestions that we have of ways that you can find other people to provide that Friday food, maybe at a more less expensive cost than like going to Chick-fil-A. But if, we just kind of, there's a series of steps that we're going to take to try to spend those funds as efficiently as possible, with the understanding that there may be no other option than to get the food from Chick-fil-A. You know what I mean? So we'll just have to, we take each case as it comes and kind of determine the best course of action to take when that happens. But yes, you could go ahead and put that in your budget.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, we're 45 minutes past our end time, but you're asking great questions, and I'm happy to stay as long as you're asking great questions. So for those of you who have other things to do, you're welcome to leave, and I'm going to hang out for a little bit and continue to ask your questions as they come. Not seeing anything else pop up yet. Let me go ahead and mention that our next RFA office hours meeting is next week. I think it's on the, yes, so it's on February the 24th from 3:30 to 4:30. And so hopefully at that point you've had a chance to go into eGAP and kind of play around with it a little bit, and maybe you might have a better idea of what questions you need to ask about the application itself.
Hey, Amanda, this is
Hey.
Andrea.
Hey.
I hate to keep dwelling on this, and I'm sorry if I missed anything, but I just wanted to clarify. So if we're writing a grant as a collaborative partner, we're CBO, and we're writing the grant as a collaborative partner with our LEA,
Mhm.
in addition to the Form 4 and Form 5s for the superintendents and the principals.
Mhm.
You still highly suggest that we go ahead and get an MOU as well for both the principal and the superintendent.
Okay, so let me think about that one, because in that case, that kind of is taken care of by your agreement between the CBO and the LEA. So you probably wouldn't have to do two separate ones in that case, because you could include any of your principal and superintendent, anything you're asking them to do in that MOU between you and the LEA. So, so you would just need to do the one in that case.
Okay, so just the Form 4 and Form 5 is all we would need to do as a collaborative partnership.
Yeah, you would do the Form 4 and 5, and then do an MOU between the CBO or your community-based organization or faith-based and the LEA.
Okay.
Yeah.
So not necessarily for separate for the principal and the superintendent.
Yeah. No, because you can include your expectations of the superintendent and the principal in your MOU with the LEA. You can kind of combine the two together.
Okay.
And that's mentioned in there when that's typically not something that an LEA who's applying would do an MOU for, because they're not, they're not going to have an MOU with themselves typically, but we just recommend for them to have an MOU with the principal and superintendent, just to make sure the principal and superintendent are on board and the expectations are in place of what's needed. One big thing that you really need to think about is how important it's going to be to have someone at the LEA level to go in and mark kids as 21st century as soon as they join the program. So that's something that you might want to consider adding to that MOU, is making sure that there is a contact at the LEA or at the school that can do that. Because once this, if this, I keep saying the wrong thing, API. I keep saying the wrong letters. Once this API is in place with easy reports, which we hope to have done by the summer, the only way a kid is going to be able to be in easy reports is if they've been marked as 21st century in Power School. So having someone at the LEA level to do that and do it quickly is going to be super important. And we already have an issue with our CBOs and our LEAs on the whole data exchange thing and going in and marking kids as 21st century. So I think that's why we're putting more emphasis on that partnership now. Also, even just 21st century programs in an LEA and their LEA itself, some LEAs are super picky about who they give access to Power School to, and so they have some of the same issues. Within their own LEA, they have a hard time getting somebody within their own LEA to go in and mark those kids as 21st century. So those are things that really need to be talked about ahead of time and decided how it's going to work and put into that MOU so that you are able to take attendance and things like that and do your required federal reporting, without having to fight and struggle to get somebody to do what you need them to do in Power School. So
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome. All right. Not seeing any other questions pop up. All right, I think I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording for today, because this is getting really long. Go ahead and do that.